We'll never be moved from here. Our lives will live in the seeds we've sown.
Welcome to the Art of Relating podcast, where I'm figuring out life, asking questions, becoming present with the unknown, and navigating the mystery with my dear friends. These conversations are one of my greatest resources, and I hope they can be a catalyst for you on your journey as well. I'm your host, Tammy Chow from Somatic Spirit.
All of this planted deep for the ones to come.
There's a part of me that like in a, not even like a toxic or like shadow or like, you know, painful or like bad way. Like I enjoy pain to a certain level. Like I like to put my body through things. Like that was what was so like I loved about dance was, you know, like seeing my point shoes and seeing like blood in them and seeing the blisters on my feet and stuff. I just love having sore muscles. I love feeling like I've really put my body through something.
Actually, yeah, I was talking to I'm just going to say my current partner. I obviously would say his name to you normally, but let's protect his privacy because we don't know how long they last.
You might be applying to be on The Bachelor, so.
Yeah. Marcus, I'm coming for you. Wonder how Joey's doing.
This gorgeous bride.
I
What's her
know.
name? Kayla? Or yeah, God, she's so pretty.
Caitlin. Oh, wait. Okay. You were saying, how we like pain. That is so on theme too. Cause like my partner right now, he's a rock climber and I've done like Legree Pilates, which is like an insane Pilates regimen for like 10 years. And we were talking about that love of pain. Cause like he maybe started out as more on the anxious side of attachment in our relationship. And in our saying goodbye this past weekend, I was like, oh my God, I'm so sad. I hate it. You know, like I do that pouty thing where I'm like, I hate it. And really it's just a bid for connection. I really want him to be like, I'm going to miss you too. I'm going to feel so sad. I hate it too. But he goes into fix it mode because he's like afraid that because I'm feeling pain that I will want to like withdraw from the relationship completely. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like, I love pain, like a hedonist for healing. Is that the right word?
Oh, I like that.
Hedonist?
Yeah.
Yeah, help me out.
I like
Kate,
it.
Kate's like my personal vocabulary or dictionary.
I feel like hedonism is more a general sense of like love of kind of excess or like, you know, pleasure. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I like how you're applying it actually. I don't think it's wrong.
Well, it's kind of like
Yeah.
existential kink, right?
Yeah. And that connects to what we were talking about before too, about like New York. Like when we were like 24 and even 21, especially in New York, like I just remember how much we would like love being like, oh my God, like when I first moved there, remember I went like apartment hunting and like I got blisters all over my feet on the first day because it was like raining and it got water in my shoes and my calves were sore and the AC, you know, juice is dripping on you as you're walking down the street. And then it got really hot again. And I remember like, you were just like, yes, yeah. Oh my God, New York. When I was telling you all of that. And we just like loved being like, it's so hard. There's rats everywhere. And we're, you know, we love that actually.
Right. Well, we were talking about this recently because I think you said something along the lines of like, do I just like suffering? Do I like pain? Right. And I feel like maybe for those listening, I feel like it all kind of stems from existential kink because like we both went through that phase of like learning about it. Like, I feel like you'd be the best person to explain what it is. So that, because it's like on to, or not, I can too.
Well, maybe we can do it together because it's been like a couple months. Well, actually, I was remembering we read it last year. Remember, we were at Ojo Caliente in Santa Fe last summer reading it. So it's been sinking in for a while and it's kind of taking on new dimensions as I continue to explore it. Like I was doing some EK with something this morning. I can't remember what it was actually. But I guess the main takeaway that I remembered from it is like essentially what you resist persists. That we have these things in our life that we're like, oh my gosh, I don't know why this keeps happening to me. I don't know why this pattern keeps showing up again and again. And then like kind of existential kink and what's her name? Carolyn, she changed her last name. I think she got married. Good for her. Whatever. The amazing, beautiful person who wrote it, you know, her thing is like, we'll go into exploring the desire in you for that thing. Oh, it's because I got rejected from a film festival that I really wanted to get into. And I've been like really working with that like rejection kink that I have. And I was just thinking about like, I was kind of like, okay, like, thank you, goddess. Like, I think I love rejection. Thank you for giving that to me. Like, I really appreciate that you rejected me from this film festival because I do love that. And instead of the attitude of like, oh my God, why am I getting rejected again? Like, please, like this shoving away kind of energy, which I feel like all it does is attract that energy to us more. And so actually by like kind of leaning into the kink of it and kind of like even using some of the exercises she has in the book where you're actually kind of like saying to yourself or like, yes, like give me that rejection. Like I'm really loving it. Thank you so much. Or writing that out and things like that, really experiencing your own pleasure that you're getting from it, then you're able to like move through that pattern. It doesn't create this like insane friction. It doesn't mean that you'll never have that happen again, but it just means like you can, like you were saying to me earlier, like it lets your energy flow through it. And maybe then you're talking about also, then it leads us to being able to make a choice rather than,
Right.
I don't know. Does that sound like what you're thinking about it as?
Totally. I'd love for you to talk about the Persephone myth because, like, you're way better at doing that part than I am. But there's like one way that I love to describe it too, as when she's like, okay, we're all on this earth and we're all suffering. Like, what if we were to think of God as one kinky ass motherfucker? And so it's like almost like working with God with that like erotic energy and also seeing our like trials and tribulations as something that we actually feel pleasure with in our body. Because so often, when, say, for that example that you gave for the rejection wound, you could be disempowered and you could be like, fuck, it happened again. I don't deserve this. I'll never, like all the stories that you're used to. And then existential kink just kind of allows you to reframe it as like, setting like a 15-minute timer and just being like, okay, I allow myself to feel the pleasure of being rejected. And then in that, you're like, oh, I noticed there's actually an expansion in my chest, or there's like erotic energy, in my pelvis. And then you follow that and you follow that. And then it like takes you back to like a little kinky, maniacal part inside yourself that's like, ooh, just like give me more rejection, give it, all in this like BDSM way. Like, I want to feel more pain. And I just like, love looking at it this way because it also aligns so much with our, goddess path with our teacher, Adriana Rizalo in Tantra of like, everything is energy, like everything can be erotic and movable when we choose to engage with it that way.
Yeah. And of course, thank you for explaining it in really beautiful somatic terms and actually walking through an exercise correctly. Because I'm always like, oh, I think I got it. And I didn't even like read the second half of the paragraph of the book or something. I'm going out doing the exercise like my own way. And then you're like, you tell it to me correctly. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. But yeah, thanks for explaining that in beautiful somatic work terms. And the Persephone myth, I mean, do you want to talk about that still? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You always
Yeah,
like
I mean,
feel it so much better than I can understand it. Like I need to hear it again and again to understand what the fuck. It's like
I just love mythology.
I know you love mythology.
Yes.
And then I have like that blackout trauma from high school where like as soon as it becomes like anything borderline academic, I'm like, woo, like I disappear. So Kate's always been the one who's like read like the world history stuff and like explained it to me in ways that my mind could understand.
Yeah, I was thinking about that also, that tendency in us. Like for me, like I want to go off and do like independent study all the time. I like don't want to be told what to do. So I'm like, let me go take all these books and read them on my own and figure out my own practice. And so I have a similar resistance to like what you're talking about. Like it's taken me so long to move into community and actually like kind of not just kind of like being on the fringes of or picking up little exercises around from like practitioners like yourself who are super wise and very informed. And I feel like you are really good at being in relation and in community, and not that you like being told what to do either. And we both have like, of course, both of those things going on. But yeah, it's just funny. Like I'm like, I'd much rather go like take 10 books home and read them all and then be able to like tell you about them. But I think those strengths work well together too in us. When we bring each other into it.
Yeah. So
I was just thinking about
the Persephone myth.
Yeah. So the myth, essentially, Persephone is the daughter of Zeus and Demeter. Yes. So she is like drawn in this famous myth where she's drawn down into the underworld. We like, if you know Greek mythology, the story of Persephone being drawn down into the underworld and kind of like being forcibly taken down there, essentially abducted and raped by Hades and forced to stay there underground as the queen of the underworld. And what Carolyn Elliott is saying in Existential Kink, forgive me if I'm getting her name wrong, is essentially like there's another way to view this myth. It connects to like separation from God. Like essentially like we incarnate into this life because we want to experience a certain level of separation. Because if we were just unified with God, then we would be in heaven. We would be immortal, eternal, all love, all being. And so that separation is what we came into this life to experience. And that includes the pain of separation. There's a certain amount of pain that we chose to experience in this life. And so we can view Persephone as in her story, gosh, I should have reread it. Sorry.
No, like she chose this life.
Yeah, like there's something about the pomegranate seeds. Like once she goes down there, she chooses to eat the pomegranate seeds. Whoever's listening to this should just read Existential Kink because it's going to be way better than whatever I'm saying. But there's something just about like, actually, it's the way that we record myth. Like, because of the patriarchy, it's been commemorated that Hades was the king of the underworld. But actually, pre-Greek mythology, in the ancient days, there was this myth before the Persephone saga of she who destroys the light, which she says is similar to Kali, which is interesting. Persephone was known as the queen of the underworld alone before we ever even had the conception of Hades. And so the way she reframes this myth is actually Persephone is the queen of the underworld, and she chooses to go up into the above world and like create Hades so that he can abduct her and tear her and take her down there so that she can experience separation. I think. Let's see.
Mm-hmm.
She suffers through her ordeal, and then she eats the food of the underworld, seeds from a pomegranate. And when you eat this food of the underworld, then you live there forever. And she accepts the underworld back into herself and remembers that she herself created Pluto by her own choice in order to experience herself as separate and innocent. She wanted to experience herself as separate and innocent. So Pluto, the unconscious divine, hateful as he seems, is in truth our own creation, a kind and devoted lover. And that all the vast power of Pluto becomes available to us when we remember this, forgive him, take responsibility for our own experience of his power, and love him.
Wait, so who is Pluto in all of this?
Sorry, Hades is Pluto. They're the same name.
Okay, well, that's confusing.
I know. I think Hades is the Latin, is the Roman, and Pluto is the Greek. So it's interesting. Just like I was saying before, like the more that you think about this book and what she's saying here, the more dimensions it takes on, actually.
I feel like it wasn't honestly until maybe this year-ish that it's like this feeling of remembering in my body, like almost a feeling of remembering that I chose this incarnation or something. And like, I did like that 6-month container with Jamie Stein last year where I was witnessed processing my sexual trauma. And during that container, I forgot which book he referenced. I'm like the worst at that. But he was like, it's like this metaphor of a goldfish being born in water, right? And that goldfish like has no idea how great water is, or like that he doesn't even know it's water, because like that's like all he knows until you like take him out of the water into air. And then you put him back into water and he's like, oh my God, this water's so great. Like, I love that I belong in water.
Yeah, it's that David Foster Wallace speech I think he has.
Oh, great. See, Kate is my vocabulary. You're also my like reference point. You're like my chat GPT, Kate GPT.
I love it. Thank you for seeing me.
Yeah.
In that way. Yeah, like this piece I just see right here. The Kore desire to experience a great story. And in a great story, whether comedy or tragedy, there are always struggle and obstacles and opposition. There are separation and reunion. And it's so true because I come from the world of writing and learning storytelling, and especially film storytelling and screenwriting. And it's so much, and I teach it now. And so every time I teach screenwriting, I always kind of playing with how much to focus on conflict, because conflict is so the core essence of storytelling. And yet I don't want to, I guess, insinuate that storytelling is a way to separate us or to create conflict. It's actually a way to connect us. And so there's this interesting tension happening where we connect through our experience of conflict. And so the conflict has to be real though, and that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with like this enjoyment of pain, like, and kind of titrating it into our lives. a word I used from you, I learned from you. Thank you. Titrating it into our lives in ways that allow us to experience it in a pleasurable way. Maybe that's what we're doing in New York, where it's not really like killing us. We're just like, haha, we have blisters, and there's like something about like we want to experience that pain because, like you said, it allows for the healing, it allows for the catharsis and the resolution of it, which is ecstatic, it's orgasmic.
Yeah. And like if we think back to any trial we've ever had, like looking back, we're always like, what did we learn from that? Like, how much have we grown in the past 10 years since we were like doing Molly and like drugs, just like wasted blackout every night in New York, right? And I just think it's so interesting that we're now talking about, because you're talking about conflict in storytelling between characters or like obstacles that they have to overcome. And then, so me and Kate over the past 2 years, we've been like super into nonviolent communication. And just to give background, Kate and I have been friends since we were 13, BFFs. 13, is that right?
Yeah. It's been like, seventh grade. So basically it was 2020 or 2002, I think is when we met. So I think it's been 22 years.
We always get the number different. First it was 18, then it was 21, now it's 22.
Well, time is moving. It's the craziest thing.
Yes, you're correct. That makes sense. And we only knew how to relate in the ways that we knew how from our upbringing and our families. And we used to just like have these massive blowouts where I don't even know, like, I can't even describe it, but it would be along the lines of like, for example, time. Time is like one of our biggest fuck ups. Like, can I just mention why yours is the way yours is and mine? Okay, well, Kate's dad was perpetually late to everything and then like blamed it on her. And then my dad was like 4 hours early for everything, like, like super nervous, like super dysregulated. And then like I was always like so like made to be 4 hours early. So whenever Kate and I have tried to do something that involved time, like meeting up for dinner or something, we would have like this 1 to 2 hour lag of our understanding of when we're going to meet somewhere. And then we would have these like catastrophic blowouts that were just huge ruptures in our relationship that back then we didn't know how to repair. So it would end up in like me being like super cruel to you because I only saw things out of my perspective. And to me, it was a universal law, right? Because like before we start to relate with other people, we grow up with one perception of the world. And then I'm like, it's a universal law that you should be like at least 15 minutes early, at least like 30 minutes is unacceptable to be late for something, and I would like badger you. And then you would like yell back at me. And then I would retreat and withdraw, which would trigger you. We would like trigger each other's major wounds and vicious cycle, and such a like painful process of like 2 or 3 weeks of like not really talking to each other or something. And then like for me, that's like so terrifying because of like the stonewalling that I experienced from my mom. And it was awful. It was very painful. And then it would like probably end up in these long ass email exchanges between us where we're like being like lawyers, not even listening to each other, just making sure that one of us could get the last word in.
I think you and I honestly yes, that's a good characterization of everything that happened. And I think, I think you and I have always been gentler with each other for some reason. Like, yeah, we get pretty triggered. And yeah, like in those moments you're describing, like I can get like, I would get really angry and just like feel like extremely like defended. And so you're right. And I think like, I don't know, I've just always felt between us that we knew that we always wanted to stay in connection with each other. And even in those email exchanges, I feel like, yeah, we'd be going back and forth and we'd always be moving towards resolution. I think both you and I are always trying to do that. So I want to give us a little credit there with that.
Yes. There's something innate there that we knew back then, but then like drawing it back to the Persephone existential kink way of looking at things, I feel like ever since we've started to be more like, ooh, like what is this conflict bringing me? Or, what you were talking about storytelling. And then like all of my obsession about like authentic relating and circling, and then us getting to do that together. And then it's just like added a whole new dimension of like when conflict arises, like for example in France, that
Uh-huh.
there is that part in the back of me. Well, I just have more resilience for it because I know, like, in the face of this terror that it feels like in my body, I know that if I lean in, that it is going to feel better later. Like it's like we have more of that trust, I feel like, because we both see things in that way.
Yeah. In what way do you mean that we both
Um,
see things?
that we're leaning in because we love each other, and that it's like actually to come to closer connection and understanding, even if in the moments we're triggered and acting childish or lashing out or whatever. That's actually what secure relationship is built off of, which when I was younger, I thought secure meant we never fight and everything's perfectly fine, which is when we withhold and then blow ups happen later. But now I'm like, oh, I expect that me and Kate we just went to the south of France for this is the first time that we've been abroad together since we were like 16. And in the back
Uh-huh.
of my mind, like there was like part of me holding my breath of like, fuck, when is the time thing gonna come up? You
And it
know?
did.
Yes.
But you're right. Like sitting in that, especially actually in the car and that was actually in the car when we were after the toll booth incident.
Can we
You
tell
know, that
we can
was
tell the story too?
sure. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting one because it was at the end of our trip. So it was almost like kind of the rupture that we needed to discuss what had been happening. And we hadn't been just talking about it because we'd been so busy and because we'd been with, Marcia, who is wonderful. And also we don't want to burden her with processing our relationship in front of her, which we did do anyway. But,
Yeah.
but just, I remember in the car after Tammy and I, the brief version of the story is we were driving across the border to Spain from France into Spain. And I had been driving and this is in me too. I noticed it earlier, like when you're saying like, okay, it's good at this, or, I start to develop this thing where I like want to be good at it. And I want to I want to live up to that. I want to I want to know more about mythology just so that I can be the person to tell you about it. And then
Aw.
with driving, I was like, I want to know the roads. Like, I want to be the one who I know exactly what to do. And so when I got to this toll, I'd been going through toll after toll in France. And I got to this one and I didn't read the sign right. And I just made the wrong choice. I went to the toll lane where you need like a tag. And we didn't have one and you couldn't pay. There was no card slot. There was no money slot. And there was just like no way to get past this like barrier. And I was feeling like ashamed because I had fucked up and because I hadn't been able to like make get us there smoothly. And then I just didn't know what to do. And we were in the middle, we were like on a mountaintop somehow. And there was like cars racing by. It was just like a very intense moment. And then I was like, there was like a call box. So I pushed the call box button and this lady comes on and she's speaking French and she was not nice. And I do not have very good French. And I just kept, trying to like understand. And I was like, I don't speak French. And she was saying like, I don't speak English in French. And I just was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I just started to get really defensive. And I was like, kind of like, someone has to help me. Like, I just was like, help. And I just got like really upset and activated in that moment. And then you, Tammy, next to me, I thought it's like very memorable and funny to me too, that you just like burst up and you were like, je parle français, je parle français, just shouting at the woman.
I think it's notable that the entire trip, I've taken French since like kindergarten through college, but I fucking suck at it. Like it's so awful. I have this like mental block and insecurity of how bad it sounds. So I just like kind of buried it. It's like in my shadow. And so I let Kate read like the entire trip. I was like, I can't read that, Kate. Can you translate that for me?
And I was like, oh, I'm so happy to. Please let me translate
right.
with my friend.
And so like the entire trip, it was kind of like I couldn't read, but then suddenly in this moment of alarm.
Yeah, an activation. Tammy just pops up and it's because like you're saying, it's the insecurity that's making your French not come out. Like you clearly have it in you because as soon as it was a crisis situation. And this is something that I don't know about you, but is so familiar from my family too. Like, and that's why we talked about that. Like I almost have a comfort in those situations because it's like, okay, great. Now we're in crisis. Like now the thoughts are coming, adrenaline's pumping, like we're going to excel here in this moment. which is actually why I put myself in situations like that. But like with you, it was just like you like popped up, and not only were you like I didn't understand at all what you were saying to the woman. It was like sophisticated French, and you were like leaning over me and you took control. You're like, "Je parle and I had just been saying like, I don't speak French. And so this woman probably thought like I was alone. And then suddenly someone shows up and is like, "Je parle français, je parle français." And then you were like, and then she was like, "You need to give me the card number." And I remember you were like going back and forth. You were like, "The card? You want me to say it to you?" All in French. And then you were doing like the colloquial thing too. Like real French people, they're like, "Wah." They don't say "oui." And you were like, "Wah. What? Okay, seek, cut off like all the numbers. You got everything on the card, read out the card number, and the lady accepted it. And we drove through the freaking thing. And it was so intense and so funny.
Right. And that was like such a beautiful capsule moment. And then, of course, I had to like ruin it with like, well, now I want to speak my true feelings of how I felt. And that's when our conflict happened. And
that's because I was feeling like, ha ha ha, what a funny moment. Because again, like, and you were right. I mean, because our activations activate each other. Like our family and father trauma is uniquely similar and also like opposed in a way that kind of we can understand each other, but we can also, like in that moment, like I was like, if it had been like my sister and brother and mom, we would have been like, ah, that was hilarious. And, just rock on and be like, oh, we love being in trauma, or whatever. And you were like, oh my gosh, that was really upsetting to me. And I felt really unsafe. And you wanted to express that. And I think that's really valid. And for me, I heard it as like, oh, Kate, you getting upset made that whole problem worse, right? Is that kind of what happened to you?
Yeah, totally. Because it was like, that's your reaction when you get flustered is like, oh, like you get big and usually I get small. I like freeze. I'm like, I get really quiet, right? You become a bull as we figured out, and I'm become a mouse. And so it was like at that moment, then I was like, okay, well, now's the time to bring up something that's bothered me throughout the trip, right? And so the way that I brought that up was like I was trying to do it in this nonviolent communication way, but the way it actually I went into weird teacher mode of like, oh, when I go through that, like, this is what I do, which we learned is like super fucking annoying to both you and my current partner. So I'm really grateful when I have people in my life tell me that I'm annoying because I don't want to be an annoying person. Well, like not in a people pleasing way, but it's actually really valid. But so like what happened was me then kind of trying to be like, oh, when you get activated in this way, it makes me activated. But like, as we've discovered now, when I don't name my need in the same breath, it triggers you. And it happened to my partner too. Like that, then suddenly it's like, well, you want me to be a different person? Like, can I just like not have reactions? But I wonder if I had been like in that moment, I don't know, if we were trying to like workshop my need, if I was like, because like I think in the end, my need was like for you to ask me for help or something like that.
Yeah.
Because I think
but
instead I was like, when you get activated like that, I go into panic mode. And then you're like, it's like, where do we go from there? Of course, you're going to get defensive. And so
it's like, shit, I can't get activated, yeah.
Yeah. And then so then you went into like your defensive, like angry mode. And then I got scared. And then I think we were just like in that loop for a second. And I finally was like, can we just like fucking be in our discomfort together? Like, and I think I said something along the lines of like, look, I love you. I'm not like separating from you or something to reassure you that I'm not like leaving you as a friend. Cause like that's still after 22 years, we assume that we're abandoning each other.
Really cute.
Yeah. And I was just like, look, I'm not like fucking abandoning you. Like, can we just be in our fucking discomfort? And you were like, okay. We just like drove in silence for a little while.
Yeah.
And then I was like, finally, after a little while, I was like, tools, remember your tools. And I was like, oh, okay. What's happening in me is like, there's a little child in me being like, it's always about you. I just want to fucking go first. Let me fucking go first. And as soon as I acted her out, you like laughed. You were like, well, okay.
Thank you.
When you say it like that,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to remember like the sequence of like we were like sitting in silence for a while or whatever. But then I think at one point you did say like, can I just act out how I'm feeling? And I was like, oh my God, please. Thank you. Oh my God, this would be, and then that was how we realized like that part of what had like made my activation so much worse was like that feeling of having been like instructed by you on like the subsequent days or like the days prior. And that feeling of like, I just felt like I couldn't be in myself and I had to like show up as like a kind of like your fellow practitioner or something, and as soon as you just like expressed that you were feeling like a kind of like immature and childish emotion and that was okay and that like made everything flow, I think, so much more. And the acting out was so helpful for both of us because I don't remember what I did, but yours was very like, it was, I laughed and I just like loved you for it. And I just was like, oh my God, I love you. I love this little child, who wants to go first. Like, of course. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It made so much more sense than approaching it with like, not to hate on nonviolent communication, it's saved my life, but sometimes when you start, especially when people know NBC and they can hear it in your voice when you're like, when I observe this, I feel this, and I have a request and a need. It's like, okay, shut the fuck up.
I think found that it's a great starting point to open the conversation. And then it's like there's all kinds of tools like theater and stuff that come after that are more helpful for us. And also like for me and my partner, like even, and then you were like, oh, because I think when I acted out that tantrum, you were like, see, this is what I want. Like, this is what I would do with my siblings. And I'm like, I didn't fucking have siblings. I like went to my room alone and just like holed myself up and like threw up in the toilet, like all my food all the time. I know it's like totally different, things, adaptations. And you were like, I become a bull. Like, you're like, I want to fight. And you're like a little mouse. And then I was like, okay, what happens if we're in conflict and I suddenly start acting like this, like a little mouse, like,
yeah. Yeah, because it like makes me upset. It makes me feel like you're afraid of me and you don't think that I'm going to protect you. And it just makes me want to be like bigger and scarier, like we were talking about, like that actually activated me more into bull mode and you more into mouse mode when I'm more like, what the fuck is happening around here, or whatever it is. Like,
why can't you trust that I'm protecting you even though I'm yelling at you?
That's what I was doing. I was like being so, oh my God, like so much. I was just like, can't you trust I love you? Can't you trust I'm taking care of you? Like attacking you, nobody's going to feel that way. But I was like, I was just like, I'm safe. I'm a safe person. Like, let me hit you in the face to prove it.
Right.
Punch you until you realize I'm safe, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like there's and it's not like just because we've been through, like we've figured out the mouse and bull thing that we're gonna know exactly what to do the next time. But there is something about like me then in that moment knowing that about you, that then I may be less afraid of you next time, and that you knowing that about me, that you're less like you don't take it personally that I'm like, I'm scared of you,
Yeah. And that's what it is. It's just really wanting to be like seen and understood fundamentally. Cause I think that's where it is with a friendship as long as ours, like you're talking about. I mean, we've known each other such a long time. And we've also like had, like, we have never really been, except in middle school, in the same friend group, or maybe high school too. But like, we've kind of, that's what I mean about us being like almost gentle with each other. We sort of like almost suspected like that we need to both have our own worlds where neither one of us are like overwhelming each other in them, or like we, just like sisters do, I think, just needing our own spaces. And so in that way, we've been friends for a very long time. And we, of course, have had these conflicts and talked about them not very well, I guess you're right, in those emails. And just so like, there's some things that just like have never been addressed. They're like weirdly shadowed in a relationship this long. And so it feels like very threatening and confusing to have known to like know that you know me so well and that you love me. And yet in that like toll booth moment for me to feel like, how does Tammy not know that all I want in this moment is to have fixed this problem and protected her and to have never made her feel that way. And like, it's the worst. And it's just in like, you were like, how does Kate not know that like, if, that energy is just like so upsetting to me and she could have just asked for help and, like all of that. And so that rupture really helped us in that way, like, I really love, like, going back to what we were saying before, and not to say, like, again, we should like throw ourselves into like horrifying situations anymore, but like being able to handle that kind of conflict. And like you were saying, like, even in that car, even when I was sitting there in silence, like, oh my God, I feel so triggered. I feel so upset. I just want to like jump out of this moving car and like run away into the woods. I still knew that by the time we parked the car, we were going to have resolved it. And I knew
Mhm.
that you wanted that and that you
Yeah.
cared for me, and I could feel it. And it just like helped me just be like, okay, I'm going to just sit with this and let it dissipate for like, or let it kind of move. And then like, see what I really feel. Cause I was just so like in that cloud of like, oh, yeah,
I
just like
do.
it was so, it's actually good that we could have that conflict because it enabled us to find this thing that actually
Yeah.
needed to be found to light in our friendship.
Totally. Like that's such a good point. Like you're pointing out like in long-term relationships or just like friendships that we're like we know each other so well. It's almost like there's this assumption, there's this pride that's put on like Kate knows me inside and out. She can read my mind. She's my thesaurus, she's my diction, like all this stuff. And then so in that moment of activation, there's a feeling of abandonment because I'm like my assumption my made up assumption doesn't match the reality. And so that's like what causes that feeling of abandonment, even though clearly you're not going to stop being friends with me over a toll booth incident after 22 years. But that's like an
Yeah,
interesting way to think about it. And then like
so right.
leaning into this, now we actually know each other even better because we exposed like an interior part of our experience that we would have never been able to, just going through to school together or being in friendship, like the ways that we've been friends. Like it's like even more intimate because you are now you understand my internal experience and I understand yours. And I think it's just funny because you were saying like just like sisters, we've kind of known to be in our own spheres. Like you have film and I have fashion, but we always like, we would like I would live in New York and Kate would live in LA and then we would switch or whatever. And we'd like come together and be like, okay, so let's like talk about our life happenings and what we're learning, like dating older men and like, like getting fucked up in all these ways. And it's always felt like we've been like investigators, like out in the field of like emotions and trauma and like living life. Yeah. And we come together and we have notes, we take notes together and
Yeah.
compare notes. And now what's really interesting that's happening is we're merging. Like now Kate and I,
Mhm.
are like we have the same astrologer. We're talking about being in business together in some way, whether it's like real estate and design and, film and somatics. And now Kate and I are also like merging into the same community and body temple, like Adriana Rizolo, our teacher, and then even now possibly going to be in another training, Radical Aliveness, that's like a somatic training, but having to do with conflict resolution and navigating things in that way. And so, like, all the things, like, since we were 13, we've had all of these overlaps and like loves, but now we're like, it's all melding into the same sphere. And I think it's so fucking fascinating because all of these triggers and are coming up like for me, for like 13-year-old Tammy or 16-year-old Tammy, now that we're like in the same sphere. And now we actually have the tools, thank the Lord, to be able to be with them as they come up.
Yeah, right. It's almost like we needed to stay away until we had the tools to be in the same space together.
I mean, think about like the past when we were going to my first somatic practitioner, Madison Niece, had like a rage workshop. And I was like, Kate, you have to experience this. Like, you have to come to this rage workshop. And like, of course, that was like a moment that we also blew up about time. But it was like that one workshop we would like get into a blow up. Like, how on earth could we be so overlapped to work together and be in the same practitioner trainings together until now?
Yeah, yeah. And I was actually thinking of that when you were talking about abandonment earlier, because I was so shocked. I mean, not shocked, but like surprised when we had that like San Diego experience, whenever that was, 2020 maybe,
The
or
rage
2021.
workshop. Hmm.
Yeah, the rage workshop that summer. Because I remember afterwards you said you expressed that you had felt like, because we had been fighting over the phone and then I had like hung up. I just was like, I can't do this anymore. and that you felt this sense of like, oh, what if Kate is never my friend again? And then when you expressed that to me, I was like, oh, what? I would never have thought that that was on the table. And I was so confused about like how that, but you're right. It's not the actual thing that happened. It's the way that we didn't understand what was going on, and that I didn't understand you and your needs in that moment. That felt more like abandonment than me hanging up the phone. It was more just like, how does Kate not know by now that when I say get to this workshop at 1 p.m., I mean 12 o'clock. And I don't mean like, oh my gosh, I'm on my way and I have a dog with me and, I've got to stop and change my tire on my way, like,
Right.
yeah.
Well,
So yeah. That
yeah,
abandonment of not, yeah.
it's like we've had to learn how to say things or like just to specify the actual need. And that
Mhm.
was what was happening in France. Like, because Kate and we were doing a photo shoot together with Marsha. And the first 2 days, obviously, Kate's like getting oriented into a different country, but say like she came 10 minutes late after she said she was going to be back before we were going to like leave the Airbnb or whatever. And I was starting to do the thing where I was like getting worked up, but I was like not saying anything because I was like, give her the benefit of the doubt. And it's like such a tender topic that I like almost like didn't want to touch it. But I guess like part of the story is like it was the day before the shoot. We had just experienced so much just hardship going to the Magdalene caves and everything. I was tired. Everybody was tired. It felt like there was like so much riding on this one day that we planned, and we planned it on Bastille Day to do this photo shoot. We'd have to get up at 4 a.m. I was in my head because I like all my body stuff was coming up because I'm like, if I don't sleep well, and also I just like was holding all this fucking grief and everything that I had not known that I was holding, and it was all bubbling. And then the time conversation started happening, and the way that I was doing it was like, instead of just, I don't know, I still don't know. We're still figuring out how to do it. But I think what I did that was triggering was I was like, I just kept mentioning it. I was like, can we just make sure that we're leaving tomorrow at like 4 on the dot, which was almost like this passive aggressive, like, how are you experiencing that? Like, what was the impact on you? How are you hearing that?
Again, it just felt to me like a lack of trust in the fact that I really cared about that and was going to prioritize it, and that I of course knew your needs and I was going to live up to them. And I guess like even what you were saying before, it happened again just now when you were like, yeah, you were getting back like 10 minutes later. I was like, my heart started racing and my face got hot. And I was like, that's
I
not
could
what
see
happened.
that.
Because like for me, the assumption I was, and again, we're just making assumptions, that the assumption I was making was like, oh, we've talked about this, like Tammy knows now, like, and I'm doing my very best, but we're on holiday and I'm not going to like run and get myself sweaty. I'm looking at the ocean right now. Like I'll be there in a couple minutes. And like Tammy knows that I have like a 10-minute, general slider window around, when I say time. And for you, I was guessing that you were experiencing it like, we've talked about this. Like, how is Kate still not showing up at the exact on the dot time that I specified? And so, yeah, but again, it's like for me, in both cases, it's like I always like in those moments, I have you so much in mind, not to say I'm like a good person. It's certainly our people pleasing side as well. And I feel like that's like, that hurts me the most to be perceived as somebody who isn't caring for you. And I guess like in those early mornings that we're referencing, where I would get up and go get coffee or something, I was just like, I hope like I was like rushing back being like, oh, I hope Tammy sees like I'm really, taking this seriously. And so then when you kept like making that point, like you said, the day before the photo shoot, I just was like, oh, she doesn't see that. She thinks that I don't care, that I'm not going to like, and especially because the photo shoot was so much more important than just like getting to our next destination or whatever, like in those other days. So
Or like I
was boxing it around. We don't know. Again, we've been in different circles. Like this was also like for me, a shoot is something that like I always even tell my students, I'm like, I am late to everything except set. It is like my religion. I would never do that, I guess, is how I felt. And I felt so unseen when you were saying that, I guess. And that was kind of how it built.
Yeah, it's so funny because there are all these assumptions, right? Like I feel like conflict happens when there's assumptions of basically like somebody not seeing your character. And I just feel like in relationship, I've just like learned there's no like cut and I don't know if we could ever like create a cut and dry rule, but now it's like, oh, we can like delineate between, okay, today is like coffee, like chill, like, like 9 o'clock means 9:10, 9:15 or whatever, and then like now well, without that conflict, I wouldn't know that about you. Obviously, I haven't been on your set, or I have in middle school, but but like I don't think of that first, of like director Kate who's like on time, who's directing. That's actually interesting to think about because like, like we've learned so much, like I've learned so much in our relationship that I feel like I will apply to romantic relationship. But like the idea of like, I don't have a child yet, but I know that when I have a family that like with my partner, I'm going to have to like compartment, or like we're going to have to work together to know when we are being in polarity, which is like sexual attraction, eroticism, preserving that, and when we're being in resonance, which is like diapers, like all the unsexy stuff, meal planning, who's going to pick up whatever. Because when you don't separate those modes, everything blends together, you lose the sexual attraction or whatever. And I feel like that might be interesting for us to think about, because we've kind of talked about it, because when we're in work mode, you and I are like, it's almost like, okay, we're in work mode. I expect that Kate will be on time. Like our personal friendship stuff like stays outside of this. Like,
Yeah.
compartmentalizing it and shifting gears in that way. And for us to both be on the same page like that.
Yeah, I think you and I show up similarly in our work, and that we really are conscientious about it, and we're very respectful to the space that we want to be in, and it's good that we can. And again, we haven't been around each other at work, so it's good to know that about each other, especially if we're going to like work together. That if we're in work mode, that we can. I like that idea that we can be in resonance with that. And yeah, it's just interesting. It's interesting, like the kind of unspoken, like the layers of assumption, because even on that trip, I felt like we were saying to each other, like, I was like, these are the two things that I definitely want to do and like want to put time around and space around. And like, I was hearing when you were like the photo shoot, obviously, but it still wasn't working in a way. Like we still weren't hearing each other. So that's very interesting. Like what you're saying is kind of almost like a different mode.
Yeah, like we're workshopping this right now. There's no I feel like we'll be workshopping for a lifetime how we'll figure
Mhm.
this out. But it's like, what could we have done better? Or what could have been, what are ideas, Like for me, for example, my annoying toxic trait is I either go into teacher mode, like, oh, Kate, like when I get flustered, this is how I handle it. And in that moment, you're like, what the fuck? You don't think I know that? I hate it when that
Mhm.
happens to me. So learn that. And then also another thing I do is like, I was clearly getting anxious about the photo shoot because like the days before, like there was just, but I didn't know how to express it. So my go to was like, hey, just so we're on the same page, we're leaving on the dot, right? And I said it over and over again, which again triggers that like, yes, I heard you once. Like, don't you know that I know that? And I wasn't just coming to you vulnerably being like, hey, because of our history, I'm feeling like a lot of anxiety. I'm feeling a lot of fear, and it's not you. I trust that, you've worked on this so hard, and I'm even afraid to say this to you because it's so touchy for us. But like, I'm just feeling a lot of emotions, and it's almost like me not giving you the space to be able to help me.
And that was what you said before at the toll booth, that I didn't give you the space to help me.
Yeah.
Into our like abused child mode where we're like, I'm gonna have to figure this out all by myself, and no one's gonna help me, and I guess I'm on my own here.
Adriana talks about that when she teaches, and she's like, yeah, we have all of these adaptations from childhood of how we dealt with how to navigate things, and so we like go into our like self-sufficient mode of like problem solving, which for you is like, well, I'm just going to speak for myself. What was mine? Mine is like, I feel anxious. Okay. I have to like come up with a way of like saying this in a palatable way to present it to her. But it's like horrible because then it just triggers you, rather than me just being like, Kate, I feel really anxious and I need help. But like, when was that's just not the way that I was able to show up in my childhood to ask for co-regulation, basically.
Same. I mean, yeah, we would be punished for asking for that. And so we have almost like, an actual fear of it, because like, you're right. Like I also was doing, and I'll do the same thing where I'll have this whole process going on in my head where I'm like, these are all the ways that I'm helping Tammy and making myself, modifying my needs or wants for Tammy, and, she should be so grateful or whatever.
Mhm.
And then when you're so upset, it's just like, but I didn't come to you and say like, oh my gosh, I'm just feeling like I want to check in with you because I'm worried that I'm upsetting you, but I don't really know. Is this like, for example, the morning in Marseille? Like, I kind of want to wonder like about revisiting that, just because that was the morning where like I went down to the docks in the morning, and then I kind of like was making my way back up, and I got kind of lost, and I was like running, and I just like my heart started racing. And then I was like, no, Kate, it's okay. Like, Tammy is your friend. We don't need to leave right at 9 on the dot. Like, you can find your way back. Don't put yourself into this vortex where you're worried and terrified about time. Like, you're going to get back and everything's going to be okay. And they're going to be ready to go. And then when I got there, like, you had made like, I guess, and I understand now why, like, because you and Marcia just sensed that I wasn't back. So you didn't hurry to get ready. But I just got in, and you had like made breakfast, and then you like kind of like weren't talking to me, and were like moving around in the space. And it just really confused me. And I guess in your mind, maybe you were doing like, well, you were pleasing me. Like, I'll make breakfast, I'll slow down, or is that what, like, I guess I'm just wondering about that like particular morning, even though we've rehashed this so much, but we can still do more.
Yeah.
Like,
Because this has been a historical pin for us, right? I'm like, okay, we said 9,
Mhm.
and there's this almost, I'm doing the same thing. I'm like, I'm going to give Kate grace. Like, it's, the second
Mhm.
morning, and, she wanted to go see that place. And so when it became like 8:50 or like 8:59, I'm like, okay, I'm wanting to go into freak out mode. Like, I'm feeling like heightened, and I want to have the stories of like, here we go again. Or like, she doesn't, the stories of like, she doesn't respect my time, or like, I don't even know what the story is. Maybe we should like get to the root of the story sometime. But honestly,
Yeah, because I messaged you, I knew you were going there.
well, right.
And that's why I said,
But you message, I think I remember the messages were not like, I know it's 9. I think the messages were like, I found flowers. Should I get them or not? And that like was when I was like,
that's not what I
oh,
did. I know that I said,
okay.
no, I know that I said, I am coming back. I'm 10 minutes away. Because I knew
Okay.
that was,
Okay. I'm coming back. I'm 10
like,
minutes away. And then, but you asked about flowers before or after? Because you had like found flowers that we needed for the photo shoot.
yeah, I sent that first. So maybe you just didn't
Okay.
see
Yeah.
the later
Yeah. I
messages.
didn't see that. And
Yeah.
then did you send I'm 10 minutes away like at 9 or like before or after?
Before.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I just
Before. I
like,
was like, I'm going to be late.
oh, okay. I don't remember seeing that. I guess was like just kind of avoiding my messages because I was afraid of this happening. And
Yeah.
then I think all I had seen was like flowers. Like, should I get these flowers or not? And I think I had seen that at like 9:05 or 9:10. And so I was in my mode of just trying to manage my anger, just trying to manage like not having a reaction, because it was this feeling of like, in my mind, the story I was telling myself was, we said 9, we're leaving here. And then I see messages of like, should I get these flowers? And then like just the same reaction in the past. And so from that point on, I was like, fuck it. Like, I need to chill out. Like, so I'm just gonna like eat breakfast. I'll make her breakfast so that she doesn't have to like, we don't have to like stop somewhere or something, And then I think there was no communication there, because then when you got back, you're like, why aren't they rushing? Because I was rushing until it was 9, and then I was like, well, it's like, I don't know if there's like anything to figure out here. That was just like my process.
Well, yeah, it's just more so that we should have talked. Like, both of us were like you just said, you were managing your own anger. Like, the making the breakfast thing, it was like so weird to me because I had gone out and gotten my own breakfast. I just was
Okay.
like, now we're really, because now we have to do dishes. Like,
Yeah.
again, like, why has nobody assumed that I was taking care of myself?
Yeah.
And you were like, why didn't everyone assume that I was taking care of myself? And like, we both went into our own internal processes
Yeah.
where I was like, okay, don't freak out. Just send them a message. No one's going to get mad at you. It's vacation.
Right.
And you have to have some grace for yourself. And then you were doing like, I'm going to manage my own anger. Like, I'm going to try to get on Kate's level here or something,
Right.
and neither one of us, it's going back to what you were saying before. Neither one of us we're just like, okay, like I could have been like, oh my gosh, here we are. It's a time thing. Tammy, I'm so anxious. I really don't want to offend you. This is like really special being in this city. I'm lingering on the docks a little bit longer. I took a longer way home. And I apologize if that activates you, or, I just like didn't approach it at all. I just was like I was like, Tammy better read my mind.
Mhm.
And that one message that I sent,
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Even as you said that, like my heart and chest were opening, I was softening. Yeah. Actually, the need is just for you to let me in on your experience. It's not even like to be there at 9. It's like, oh, I'm really taking it in and I don't want to rush. And, I think today we don't like have that something so pertinent. And I'm like, oh, cool. Then I relax. And then now I'm like, well, now I have 20 minutes and I get to like, do what I want, and we weren't doing that. So that's actually great to know for the future because we weren't communicating about that. And so then I was conflating that experience with the photo shoot day because there was just a fear. We didn't know how to communicate it.
And you're so right. Because even as I was saying that just now, I was like, oh my God, Tammy's going to judge that so much. And as you're saying that, I'm like, okay, great. Tammy has space for me enjoying looking at the docs,
Whoa.
That's cool.
Yeah. When we share impact.
It's the same for, yeah. And like you did it before too, when you were talking about like what you were doing with the breakfast. I was like, oh, okay. Like, thank you for letting me into that. And just like, now I understand. And like, again, we didn't know about any of that had happened until like the night before the photo shoot in the car when it finally came up and Marsha was sitting there with the like big block of cheese and it was like, oh, I had no idea that you were thinking that or whatever. And so it's so interesting that we didn't like, even though we were communicating, we weren't letting each other in to each other's experience.
Right. And so teaching moment here. This is like when intention and impact like cause conflict because each of us had the best intentions for each other. You didn't want to make me mad. I wanted to be more chill for you, but we weren't collaborating. And so then what happens was the impact of what we wanted. Like my intention was to make you feel more chill. Your intention was to make me not feel like hurt or whatever. But the impact it had on me was the opposite. And so it's like we do these things where we like, it's like a bid for connection, but we don't let the other person in on our experience. And then the way we impact them is we piss them off, which causes a separation, which is the exact opposite of what we wanted.
And we were actually trying to reach out. Like, it's so funny, like that you made me breakfast. And then I was like so mad. I was like, now I have to eat this breakfast because I don't want to offend Tammy.
Right.
And you were like, that bitch better eat that breakfast I made.
Oh my God. Well, yeah. So that's interesting. So now maybe there's like kind of this idea of like, letting Kate in on my intention. It's like even now starting to catch ourselves as we do that like weird, good, like spiraling people pleasing thing. Cause I it's just so autopilot for me, especially in friendships so long ago. It's like I start to caretake you without knowing I'm doing it. But now maybe we could like catch ourselves and be like, hey, I'm doing this.
Me too.
Hey, just so you know, I'm doing this thing for you. I'm making breakfast and I'm making you breakfast because I think it'll be nice for you so that you don't have to stop on the way to get breakfast. And then you're probably like, oh, I already got breakfast, And then I'm like, oh, that saves. I didn't then overgive and then resent you for it later.
Well, it's like I'm wondering with that too is like there's that we were dancing around each other, and it's still hard to think, even though we're talking about it now in this kind of very safe space like way, that when we get into a moment like that again, that we won't be afraid of setting each other off. I think that both of us were doing that. We were both like, oh, I don't want to say the magic word that's going to make this person blow up or this person retreat. And so I wonder, like, even just what you were saying about like earlier, like, I'm feeling this, I'm starting to feel anxious. Like we said 9, I wonder if we can give each other like permission to know that we won't be offended by hearing each other's experience or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense.
It's almost like setting up a container similar to if we were like, okay, we're in this container and we're going to act out our inner children, or you're going to be a bull and I'll be a mouse, right? It's almost like, can we have like a quick like, hey, I feel like we're entering into tricky territory. We're entering into the zone of time triggering. We're here. Like some code word that's like battle or like, I don't know, like sometimes like a code word helps to just name that we're in the vortex. We're in the fucking scary vortex.
Yeah. Because both of us were like, I'm worried that we're in the vortex, but I don't want to say it because then we really will be. Exactly. But we were in it.
Right.
So.
Actually, I love that because we're like, if we dance around it, we will avoid it. But instead, with this like idea of Persephone choosing the underworld, we could have a code word, whatever that is, to be like, we're in it. And, like, well, and as Adriana says, like, assume activation, assume that this is going to be messy right now. but then we're just better equipped. Almost like I've talked about, like relating is almost like a fencing match. You know, you've got your stuff on and you're sparring, but you know, you're not like, I'm actually going to like kill each other.
Right. Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So we got to come up with
I
a
like that.
code word for that. Like me and my partner, there was one where that happens where sometimes he gets like kind of heady or something, as men do for women. Like, you know, we're like talking about something we're really interested in, and then he goes off on tangents like deep, like way too heady for me. Or in that moment, I don't have the capacity. I want to be in my feelings, I want to be in my body. But that triggers him into like his old story of like, I'm too much for people, like people don't understand me. And so then our code word for that is space, because my need right then is actually I need mental space. I like don't have the capacity to be like chewing on things. And like then he knows like, oh, it's just not personal. And so that's more like a code
Yeah.
word for my need for him to, but like for us both, we can like create a code word.
Yeah, just like, I guess going back to the Persephone story, like what opened up for me so much in reading that, and even in this last year, thinking back on, you know, like our New York years, especially like taking away the shame from being in that space, from being in the underworld. Like there's almost like when you get into that underworld space, there's like, how did I get here? What did I do wrong to get here? Oh no, someone's gonna like see me here and they're gonna, you know, punish me, or they're gonna call me an underworld person or whatever it is, you know. And so it's interesting because like with this time vortex with us, like both of us are almost, I feel like for me, it's almost like we're ashamed to be in it again. Like, aren't we past this?
Yeah.
Or like, you know, it's just like, didn't we figure this out already? Like, haven't we talked about it? And and that is part of the dancing around it, where we're like inhibiting our ability to even enter it with each other because we're so ashamed to be in it. So the practice of naming it, I think, could be a really good way to like just take that shame away too.
Whoa, this is like a new meta. Like this, we're encountering new territory like on this call today, right now, because as you're saying that, you know, we've talked about the idea of like as within, so without, right? And we have both been working on our own processes of like, oh, how am I, like for me, how am I here with the health stuff again? I can't believe I'm having gut issues. I can't believe it's triggering body and eating stuff. You know, but of course now, you know, like you're always there to remind me, like, Tammy, of course it's coming up right now. You're being asked to like reintegrate your 16-year-old self, your 23-year-old self. And I'm like, all right, yes. Like I love this. I love this part of it. And so now we're actually doing it in relationship, which we haven't done before, of like, ooh, like really being like us holding this thing, this trigger for us both together with love. So that's like
Mm,
really new. And I love it, you know,
mm.
because it's like
I
we
love
just
that.
assume it's
Yeah.
going to be fucking messy.
Yeah, you're right. Like not even shaming it, just being like, oh, here's our time trigger again. Ha ha ha. Here's our old
Yeah. And it's
friend.
like, well, and I feel like putting that around it then allows us, because like after the fact, we're always like, ooh, what if we like break out into song? Cause like we like love musicals, you know, or like
Mhm.
we might get to be more playful about it and discover like a new way through.
Yeah, it's almost like it could be exciting when it comes up, just like you're saying, just so in our individual experiences, when we're like now, I think both you and I are in that phase where we're like, ooh, okay, this thing's coming back. Great. Can't wait to work through it. Great. You know,
Yeah.
rejection kit, whatever. And
Right.
so yeah, like now we can almost approach it with like excitement, like, okay, now you get to do a performance, Tammy. Like now
Yeah.
time has entered the chat and I want to see you dance it out. I want you to just show me how mad you are at me.
Wait, this is amazing because this is actual co-regulation. Like this is what we needed in childhood, was for somebody to be like, okay, what's your internal experience right now? And so we're actually setting up the stage for me in my triggered state, like, and for you then, like you have more capacity to be like, all right, I'm not going to take this personally. Tammy, like, show me your experience. And then for me to be like, show me yours. And then usually that's like what we needed. It's like all we need.
It's always what we need. And it's so funny that it is always what we need. And it's always the thing we fear most, you know,
Yes.
still. And that just goes to show, I guess,
Totally.
how deep it is. Yeah. Oh my gosh. This
Wow,
is
I love
cool.
this. Oh my God. Are we going to teach? This is going to be what we're teaching at our retreat that we haven't planned yet, but is coming one day.
Sure. What is the thing that we're teaching? Time dances?
No, but not time dances, but I mean, all the ways that all the creative ways that we've come up to do like conflict resolution and like showing yourself, showing your inner experience, you know? I mean, like all the things that we're obsessed with, like ritual theater and poetry and dance and writing and film and somatics, like all of this stuff like goes into our conflict resolution.
Yeah, conflict resolution. And it's like when you were saying co-regulating, that struck me because neither of us have children, but I know you want them and, maybe someday or whatever. And it just occurs to me because I think about my friends who are parents and they say like there's nothing more triggering than parenting because you're so I'm just realizing this has applications essentially to like different kinds of conflict resolution where one party is not really able to participate as well, like a child or something, or like a coworker. But well, I don't know, never mind. Sorry, I'm going a very different direction. I always do that. I try to make everything global. We'll just stick to what you're saying. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like
think it's like the beginning
conflict resolution.
stages. It is, yeah, it's conflict
Yeah.
resolution, but just different creative ways. And I feel like when you have a space to practice it, then you're just more equipped in the moment. And just like we're taking space now when we're not heated to be like, okay, we need a code word like time warp or time zone or time vortex, right? Or just to name it like next time where I'm like, okay, Kate, I'm avoiding this, but I think we're in the time vortex. Are you in? And then you're like, okay, I'm in. And then it's like we've both consented.
Yeah.
And I just feel like it almost like triggers witness side of us to stay online as well as our childish sides. Like, so then we like have more capacity.
I really like that. I like that a lot. Just to be like, are you in? Because we can also say no,
Yeah.
like right now we need to get in the car.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but
Consent.
like at least you it. Yeah, consent is good. I
Oh
was
my
just
God.
thinking too, another term for it. Who we could make someone really happy, or I don't know if it would make her happy, but
anyway, yeah, maybe.
fair,
I like that. I
fair.
like that idea. Okay, we could reclaim the time warp from our third friend in the group who was a bit of a bully to us both. And we will reclaim the Monty Python time warp song. And I'll be like, okay, Kate, I think we're in the time warp
Rocky
again. Are
Horror.
you in?
It's Rocky Horror. No.
Oh, sorry. Rocky Horror, not Monty Python.
But yes, I am in. I'm down for that. I think it's funny to take that back for us. But we can do whatever you want.
No. Time warp was so loud in my head. It literally was playing this entire time we've talked about it, and I've resisted it because I did.
Me too. And I keep imagining our former friend and her little like thing the whole time we're doing this. So she's here. Let's just bring her in.
All right, cool. Well, we are transmuting that painful relationship with her, and we are reclaiming the Rocky Horror Picture Show for ourselves and our conflict resolution.
I love it. And transmuting our own stuff with time. Well, I don't know if it'll ever. That's the thing, I guess, is we're letting go of like the need to change ourselves or each other. I mean, we both want to do better, of course, out of care for each other. And it's like, yeah, let's just take, here we are. Here we are again.
Ooh, yeah, I love that. Like shifting like the perception from needing to change anything into just like in my attachment training, it's like moving from controlling behaviors into collaboration.
Ooh, that's good. That's the title. I mean, that's what we've just been talking about. That's exactly what we're talking about here.
I love it.
Everything. In the ways we try to control our pain, and the way we used to try to control each other, and the way we used to try to control the world around us. And none of it ever worked.
Yeah.
And now we're collaborating. We're learning to collaborate.
Totally. Exactly. It's like, hey, here's where I am. Let me let you in on my experience and let's just figure out what's next together.
I love that. Yeah, that's what we didn't do until the
toll
booth.
Cool. So now I'm just curious to see, wow, I feel like we have so much. Kate and I are possibly going to be in a training together and I'm going to get triggered in all sorts of ways like I was when I was 13 about how she's smarter than me and she's more outspoken and takes up more space.
By the way, that triggers me too, right?
Really? Wait, what do you mean?
Because that's my thing with my sister. It's just like I was always so afraid because if I was ever in like in dance, like I was, had stronger technique and a more, ballet body. And like, we could like everything that anytime I would show up in my fullest expression, it felt like it directly harmed my sister. And so
Mm.
it's not I completely, and I want you to say that, and I hear you on it, and it's just like even knowing that you are afraid of that makes me like afraid to show up, and I like don't want to be too smart or be too outspoken.
Well, we were just talking about this being your edge right now because like with like the whole weed thing of like needing to dampen your experience or dampen your bigness
Mhm.
because it's like too much, right? And so of course my trigger is like your trigger. And guess what? We need like another code word that's like not about time, but just like it's like another vortex, we're like in another vortex and we're like, yay, how do we get to navigate this together now? And what
Yes.
will we learn about each other and ourselves through it?
Yeah, it's just fun stuff for the future for us now to get to work through.
Yay. Oh, so
Yay.
great. Well,
Yeah.
speaking of time, I think
Yeah.
now would be a good time to wind down, but
This is beautiful. Thank you, Tammy. And I just love that you bring these tools into our relationship, and that you like have the patience and the care for both yourself and for me to see things through all the time. And it's not a small thing, and I'm really grateful for it. And I'm just grateful for your friendship and that we can have this like new playground. We used to have a playground of like drugs and having sex with very inappropriate men, and now we have this new playground that's like so nurturing and interesting, and still full of conflict in the best ways, and that's like beautiful to me. So thank you so much for having that space and just being this big-hearted beautiful friend of mine, best friend.
thank you. And thank you for being my best friend and for having patience with me and telling me when I'm annoying, because I definitely need people like that in my life. And for being, I don't know if you're Glenda and I'm Alphaba or vice versa, or if either of us, or both,
We're
but thank you
both.
for being my other half. The Anna to my Maya from Pen
Yeah,
15.
because I knew you.
I have been changed for good.
Beautiful.
When we end on that,
Beautiful.
I
Talk to you
love
soon.
you.
Love
Okay.
you.
Mwah.
Mwah. Bye.
Bye.